Buonasera, einen schönen guten Abend. Bonsoir. I wish you a warm welcome to this meeting. Glad to see you all. So many people for the beginning of our Heritage Contact Zone Week with different meetings, different chapters, so to say, to present to us, to the partners, to the European Commission, and to a public of experts, specialists, the results of our project Heritage Contact Zone. You see, we are here in Bucharest and the Goethe-Institut. Behind us means me and Alexandru Poteca, the artist who has run the workshop here in Bucharest. You see partly the results. We will talk a little bit about it later, the golden results of our workshop, which was very interesting. But we will also talk about the other workshops having been in Amsterdam and in Budapest. And we will give the floor to the facilitators, those who organized the workshop, and also to observers, because it was very important for us to have for every workshop also international observers coming from inside the project, from the partners of the project. Just some technical issues, please. Mute your mic, and you will find in the chat once again some informations, website and Facebook and Zoom if you want to get some more information during our meeting here. What will happen here, we will just show you in a minute a film about this project, and then we give the floor to the different actors, and you will have the possibility, that's for sure, also to ask some questions in the chat that we will take here and give to the other participants. So let's start our small film about this project.
Hi, my name is Joachim and I'm the director of the Goethe-Institut of Bucharest. And before I came to Bucharest, I was in Marseille, and there I was actively involved in our project.
Hi, I'm Cristina Modranu, co-curator of Theatre as Resistance project in the frame of Timișoara 2021.
My name is Jasper Charcraft. I work at the European University Institute, and I'm an anthropologist.
My name is Lars Ebert. I'm a co-director of the Cultural Center H401 in Amsterdam, a historical house in the Canal district with a very particular history that ranges from hiding to a sectarian group and the home of an artist.
My name is Anja Zückmandl. I work at Etzrayim Synagogue in Chania on Crete.
I'm Ovidiu Dajbog-Miron. I represent Timișoara 2021, European Capital of Culture.
I'm András Lukács. I'm the president of the Human Platform and also an activist of the Living Memorial Group in Budapest.
My name is Konstantin Fischer. I am the curator of the exhibition Parallel Points of View, organized by Etzrayim Synagogue Chania.
My name is Cristina Zamfirescu. I work for the Goethe-Institut Bucharest, and I'm in charge for the Heritage Contact Zone website. I hope that you are now much more familiar with the Heritage Contact Zone working group, and please don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter, follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
Main about our program, our project, and certainly this program organized in the framework of the European Year of Cultural Heritage. We will talk about further details during this week. Tomorrow we will have the keynote lecture by Andrea Peto. Thursday we will have two another meetings and chapters of this program, and I think you have got the program in your hand. What we will do now is, as I said, to talk about the workshops which were organized today. But first of all, let me underline one point which seems to be very important for me, because in the framework of this project, we developed a toolkit. And this is also the main result of our project, this toolkit. A toolkit, and I will just read you some sentences from the introduction of this toolkit. A toolkit which can be used by practitioners and academics alike who work with contested heritage and creative practices. It brings together the findings of the project's partners' activities and reference points that they have collected. And it is very important, this is also to underline that we are partners in very different cultural contexts, in very different cultural fields. So we have our partner in Hungary, in the Netherlands, in Germany, in France, in Greece. The toolkit is designed for practitioners who work with difficult heritage. One might argue that all heritage is difficult, to one degree or another, but some sites, objects, and practices are particularly contentious, or sometimes just particularly contested. Conflict can be useful, bringing issues out into the open. And this toolkit is designed to help you make the most of your difficult situation. The toolkit help practitioners use heritage as a space for dialogue, for encounters to further more multivocal and creative narratives that can help develop more inclusive collective memories through culture and art. It draws on the experience of the HCZ consortium and borrows from some of the existing best practices out there. And this is also for our meeting now, the main word, best practices. So we will discuss over the workshops. And I would like to ask, first of all, Esther Kapten, who has run the workshop in the Netherlands 2 hours ago. So just it's just over, to comment on what she did and what you experienced. May I underline also, please, that to keep in time, everybody should limit him or herself to 5 minutes in the first time, and we can ask questions afterwards. So Esther, please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Joachim, and I will try to be brief and summarize in 5 minutes. I have been facilitating the workshop on Pusakas. Pusakas as sensitive heritage objects. And first of all, I would like to just briefly explain what a Pusaka is. This is an object from the colonial Dutch East Indies or the independent Indonesia, brought to the Netherlands, in this case for the workshop. And it's an object with mystical or magical powers for individual use, but also within a context of national or even international boundaries, let's say. These objects can have a certain power in order to heal. We've been talking about the Pusaka as an object from Indonesia with 6 participants. One is an author of a book on Pusaka who has been making an inventory of the daily use of Pusakas by individuals in the Netherlands of Indo-European, Moluccan or Indo-Chinese descent. We had a PhD student as well as a curator at an art museum in Amsterdam. And we had 3 historians who were curators of the National Military Museum in Soesterberg and the Colonial Army Museum in Arnhem, all in the Netherlands. And then Lars was here as an observer. And we've been talking about Pusaka, what actually can be considered a Pusaka, what would what is needed to apply in order to be categorized as a Pusaka. So first of all, it should be an object that is a heirloom, which is given within the family context from one generation to another. So the family context should be taken literally, so within mother or father towards a daughter or son, but it can also be a generational metaphor, so to say, within the nation. So it can also be an object that is of national or even international importance, and that is given within the confinement of a museum in order to preserve and store and also display. The mythical or magical powers that are having to do with healing of a past, a difficult past, a contested past, a colonial and post-colonial context is also included, and it should have a certain value. So this value can be either emotional, financial, aesthetic, or artistic. And the last criteria that we've been talking about was there should be a community involved. So it's not only the object in itself that is making it what it is, but it also needs a community in which a narrative is created around this Pusaka. So we've been talking about the fact that within families, these objects are given towards another generation. And in particular, in relation to war, the Second World War in Indonesia, and also the subsequent migration of a lot of people to the Netherlands, these are cleavages within the family history. And the Pusaka as an object has the power to heal, to give comfort. So in a way to heal the cleavages that's been created by traumatic experiences. One of the curators in our group remarked that family part might be disrupted when you put it into a museum collection, because then the talking within generations and among generations is stopping. But then we got a discussion while other curators say, actually, when it is put in a museum, the dialogue is still continuing because we do not have it isolated within the archive, but we would like to really resonate it within a community, and therefore it's much more to be thought of as an interactive object which facilitates dialogue between the museum professionals and a community of people who are involved. And there's a number of criteria that should be met in order to make this interactivity possible. For example, we should know what's in the collection itself, and one of the obstacles for this is that museums such as the National Military Museum does have a lot of these objects, but that the description is not complete. So they actually said that there's still a lot of work to be done in order together, preferably with the community, to make this happen and to make it resonate more and more, so that the object, but also communities, can speak to each other, so to say. So there's a lot of things to be done in order to be opening it up. Making a connection with the country that it derives from, so this is the former colonized Indonesia, colonized by the Netherlands. It was a question, should we enter into a dialogue? And if so, when and what, under what circumstances? And the museum professionals were of the opinion that it's important that there is a claim, especially when this is about objects that has been obtained in a war. So it's not purchased, but it's really as an act of war that it's come into a collection of the Netherlands. If there's a claim of Indonesia, then we definitely, and without any doubt, we should return these objects. But if there's no claim, it's not automatically the case that it should be going back to Indonesia, because they say it might also be in due time, it has become part of the collection also of the Netherlands. So we should enter into a dialogue, and perhaps it is thinkable to consider these objects more as hybrid objects. So yes, we are looking for multi-vocality and multi perspectives. But then also it might be the case that it's difficult to say it should be either or in this or that country. The colonial context is making us think about the unequal power relations that are behind it. So possibly returning to Indonesia should be preferably, but if they're not asking it for themselves and also perhaps indicating that the country, Indonesia itself, does not have the facilities to store it in the museum, perhaps we should enter into a dialogue and see if it can be done in another way. The claim is an important thing for the professionals. For the, and I'm not talking about these in an antagonistic way, the professionals versus the peoples that are involved, but for the people involved, the healing part and the emotional part is very important of the object, and especially because they are connecting people to certain points in the diaspora. So the comforting part and also the curing part is here a big thing, and this also should be included possibly in a museum display. So we ended with talking about the hybrid elements of the Pusaka, and thinking about the restitution and the relationships behind it, whether they are unequal in the past and preferably equal in the now and then, but you know, there's a much more to say about that. I think I will keep it here because I think my 5 minutes are over. It's pretty difficult to summarize it in such a short time.
We can't hear you.
Just a mini question, Esther. Are there also examples of artistic use of these objects by locals or by strangers? Is this permitted, or is it only in this museum and restitution topic?
Yeah, good question. We also talked about artistic interventions. Sometimes they are asked for by the museums themselves because they admit or have the idea that the official narrative by a museum is not the ideal way of presenting it. So they are working together with artists, and I do think when they are not in display of a museum, on the individual level, if persons themselves have it in their own ownership, yes, you can open it up also for artists, and I'm sure that's been done.
Okay, thanks a lot. We will come back to this certainly a little bit later. So I would like to give the floor to Marie Heller, who is our Hungarian partner for the Human Platform. And you organized the workshop together with Abris Bendig. I don't know whether he is here too. And it was all about the idea of nation, if I'm not wrong. Marie, would you take the floor, please, and also tell us for some minutes what you did?
Yes, thank you for letting me speak about our project. First of all, I have to say, for those who do not know us, Living Memorial is a protest movement, and we have a special technology of special way of dealing with problematic questions and contested heritage, and this is what we did today as well. So it was a little bit different from what we heard from Esther. That is to say, it was a discussion on the problem and the representation of the nation. First of all, I have to say that during the 2 years of the project, we had several sub-projects in Budapest. One was a big exhibition that we organized under the title shattered memory and talking objects. It was an exhibition of 50 objects with all kinds of stories which were related to them, most of them with really heavy family traumas and narratives. And these are, the whole exhibition is still available on our website. Then later we worked, because you might know that 2020 is the 100th anniversary of the Trianon Treaty. That is to say, the treaty after the First World War, where Hungary was again on the wrong side, like in most of the last 500 years. And Hungary lost half of its territory and 2/3 of its population. And for this year, the Hungarian government organized all kinds of commemorations. And our idea was to see, first of all, to what extent this trauma is still existent in the nation. And this is why we organized a contest for young artists to try to create alternatives, commemorative spaces for this event. So that was the second thing that we did this year. And then we started to talk about a new problem, at least a new problem in our discussions, but a problem which is very aching and vivid in the Hungarian population. That is to say, how we describe, how we feel, how we represent the nation, and especially in the actual Hungarian context that you might know about the illiberal state created by the Orbán government, and the very, very strong nationalistic propaganda that is dealing with the nation. So we wanted to see whether there are other possibilities to imagine a nation. And so this why it was our young colleague and co-host of the discussion today, Abrish Bendek, who proposed a new topic for discussion. And so this today, this workshop was the second event that we organized in the network of this problem, the notion and the representation of the nation. So we invited two political thinkers, two political scientists. One is a right-wing person, a liberal right-wing thinker, and the other one is a liberal left-wing political scientist. And we thought that there will be a big discussion between them because we thought that they, especially knowing their writings, we imagined that there will be a big discussion about how to give a notion to the nation. But it was very interesting to see that they agreed on a lot of points, especially on the fact that the actual representations of the nation, which are practically present in the country, are very negative. You also have to know that, first of all, the Hungarian society is really cut into two. There are very, very strong cleavages between the left wing and the right wing, and especially the Orbán government's 10 years have really deepened these cleavages. And Orbán is at this moment working on creating a kind of a new image of the nation, which would be a strong nation with a lot of roles in Central Europe and especially in the Carpathian Basin. So the question arose during the workshop whether there are alternative images for the nation, and if so, where can these be found, or what are the elements on which one can imagine different visions of the nation. And well, I would say that both of our invited guests were rather negative, especially our right-wing political scientist friend. But both of them thought that it was nearly impossible to create a new narrative for the nation, and they were trying to look into other commonalities that might be a possibility for creating new collectives, and of course what came up as a possibility is of course the fact that there is a globalized world, and especially that Hungary is now part of the European Union. So the question was asked whether there is the possibility of creating a new narrative which is more open, which is more globalized, or which is more close to a European civilization, and how that could be built. So I cannot give you a how shall I say, an answer, or we did not find any solution to the problem. So everybody agreed that this is a very serious problem, and as the Hungarian society is nowadays, in that context, it is a very serious problem. So we have more questions than solutions, and of course I think that the debate will continue, and we nearly had difficulties in leaving the people because there were still so many questions which went on. So maybe I should stop here and answer questions if you have some.
Thanks a lot, Marie. Just one small question. Who were the participants?
All kinds of people. We had more than 40 participants. Some people were changing, so I suppose that we reached out to something like 60 people. So we had either people who generally come to our discussions, but there were also just people who were interested because we have a weekly newsletter. So it was publicized, and also on our Facebook page. So people, whoever was interested could come in. We also had people from the university and some students.
Thanks for this. I just wanted to say we had 2 workshops with experts and specialists from museum and from the artistic field, and the one in Budapest with the general public. So we are dealing with different kind of publics, and you will find this back also in the toolkit, which is for specialists, but also for working with the general public. So now I will give the floor to Alexandru Poteca, who is next to me and who worked with golden objects an hour ago. And we had, so to say, we had a mixture between a very practical workshop and also considerations about how we work with this object, how is your way to consider things. So, and we had also a short communication from a philosopher who tried to place the subject in the nowadays discussions. So, Alexandru, please tell us more about your workshop, please.
Yes. Hello. So we had a workshop here in Bucharest at the Goethe-Institut about transforming ordinary objects, not from communist time in Romania, 70s and 80s. And we had this practical workshop about this transformation in an artistic way, but we also had a talk about the memory of objects. So some participants at the workshop, they told us about the history of the object, about their own attachment for the object, and also a frame of that time in Romania. So yeah, we have tried to reconsider the material culture from Romania from the 70s and 80s and give to these objects like different kind of meaning. In the sense, if you cover with gold, we quest if these ordinary objects which are mostly thrown away or like somewhere like stuck in the storeroom, how can we revive them and question our recent past to the objects, the memory of objects. So this workshop, it's a kind of fragment of a larger project that I've made in 2010, and this installation, which is called Golden Flat, and this rebuilding an old flat from the 70s and 80s, like apartment from the Bucharest, like other cities. So for this project, I had to approach these objects like not only in the aesthetic way, but also in the documentary kind of way, like, or I can say also like urban ethnography. So for this project, I had to collect hundreds of objects to restore an apartment. So it was like interesting for me to talk with the people that who gave me the objects, and also in the flea markets, and listen to their stories about that period of time to the objects, like the attachments, their own attachment, or like critical about objects. So for me, this kind of objects that are kind of historical, social, and affective documents. And through that, I had to rebuild this kind of an apartment and quest what should I keep, what we should throw away from our recent history. So, but in my view, we have to assume our future, our recent past, and think in the future how to preserve or not to preserve this kind of heritage. So yeah, it's about questioning. And
thanks a lot, Alexander. Also one question, if I may, because that's neither me nor our observer Jasper can really answer to. Do you think that this is still today a contested heritage in Romania, or is it just only a forgotten heritage?
I think it's also contested, but also it's forgotten. And we through our projects like artistic projects and only social projects in Romania, we have to deal with that and answer what we're gonna do, because for 30 years we didn't do many things about this heritage.
Yeah, because we talked about it already a little bit earlier. There is, and this was one of our partners in Timișoara, a museum of consumerism from this time, and they opened also, I don't know exactly in which town, but recently a museum, the first museum of collectivization in Romania. So it is clear to see that, as you said, during many years, nothing or very few things were
about
done.
20 years. Yeah, about 20 years. Nothing was done in this matter.
And you want you would like also to put your room, so to say, in a museum.
In a museum, yeah.
So we hope.
Like underline this lost word from the 70s and 80s.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Maybe I could give the floor now to the observers. We would proceed in the same way. I would ask, first of all, Lars, who is one also of the main organizers of this project, and he is working for the H401 in Amsterdam, to give us his impressions. Please, Lars.
Thank you, Joachim. It was a fantastic workshop. And I was quite a bit nervous before the workshop, because if you are so immersed in developing a toolkit over 2 years as a collective experience with all the partners, that input into something that has to become a consistent and coherent document, it's quite something when curators from the professional field read it and take it as a point of departure to talk about Pusaka, what the project that Esther brought in. But I found that they took it up fantastically, and even in so far that although they were a small expert group, they brought in, on the invitation of Esther, objects they talked about. So in a way, they adopted our methodology of practice-based research, or participatory or collective dialogue-based research, to somehow get their own position in the museum world and their own strategical thinking much more transparent. There are a few things that I found striking in the discussion, that there was a kind of not opposition, but collective memory formation in the light of national or international relevance of objects, and museum approaches was discussed versus family memory. And family memory is probably something we've all been doing in our project by using everyday objects like we just saw in Romania and relate that to the collective story that we tell. I found it also not so surprising, but remarkable again, as so often, that the conversation is very quickly about solutions. Should we restitute objects or should we not? Isn't it easy to do it this way or that way? Whereas I think the project that we've been engaged in, the Heritage Contact Zone project, was about talking about it rather than solving the problem. And I think there is a lot of ground to gain still. I also found Esther's criteria that she formulated. You didn't mention it, I think, in your summary, but you've got criteria what makes a Pusaka, that it's a piece of heritage that is passed through generations, that it's of relevance nationally, internationally, that it's magic, mystical, and that it's some kind of value. And you had a whole row of different values that we can attach. And I thought, well, this is something to think through in the next project, or maybe for the part 2 of the toolkit, to use these criteria, because I thought they don't only work for Pusakas, they would probably also work for the objects in Romania of the 70s. And the terminology I found interesting. Esther, you tried to bring in the parallel point of view, a notion that we use in the toolkit, but then that turned somehow, and you also mentioned it already, into thinking about hybrid nature of objects. So it's not parallel stories, but maybe hybrid stories. So in that sense, the toolkit itself became an object, a conversation piece. And I think that in that sense, I was very happy because it was really a creative dialogue that has brought us all, even me as an observer, although I just leaned back and consumed, I learned a lot, and I would say that it was a prime example of how dialogue can work and how we can invite people in to form our own strategies and policies, maybe on institutional level, but maybe also much broader on a societal level. So I think I'll keep it with this. It's all praise.
Thanks a lot, Lars, for these remarks. You just already mentioned it very briefly, but I have to repeat it, that we are applying for another project, a kind of Contact Heritage Zone 2, and we hope to continue the work on what you said, talking, not finding, but also dialogue and talking about solutions. I think we will come back during the next meetings this week also to the question how we deal with this second part. So I would like to give the floor to the observer of the Budapest workshop. Do I see?
Cornelia Kish.
Yeah, Cornelia, you're a little bit in a shadow, so to say. I didn't really see you. Excuse me. Yeah. So you have the floor, Cornelia.
Yes, thank you very much. As said, one thing I wanted to start with a little bit, that our introduction as Culture Action Europe was not in the film, so I would like to say a couple of words about Culture Action Europe, because we had the role in the Heritage Contact Zone project to bring the project outcomes and results and actually messages on a European policy level, and also to find connections to other stories. Because Culture Action Europe is a major European cultural network of artists, activists, academics, and policymakers. And our mission is to put culture at the heart of public debate and decision making by raising the awareness about the contribution of culture to the development of sustainable and inclusive societies. So this is the reason, of course, that Heritage Contact Zone was very crucial for us as one of the Creative Europe projects. As regards the workshop, as Marie pointed out, we had 47 to 60 participants that had a dialogue about the notion of the nation and the meaning of the Hungarian nation. I myself is a Hungarian, so I could very well participate due to the fact that I was speaking the common language. And participants tried to answer to the question, what brings us together as a Hungarian nation? And what I tried to link it to the Heritage Contact Zone project, the question of how do others think within the Hungarian nation is definitely something that links this Hungarian workshop to the discussions that the heritage projects, that the Heritage Contact Zone project was trying to find. And we try to bring together different points of view around one table in a participatory way. So how do others think within the Hungarian nation? There was a difference made between the current opposition and the currently governing party narrative, as Mary also pointed out. It's quite harsh within Hungary currently. And it was pointed out that what links us together are not necessarily the ones that others think that links us together. So what, let's say, if you talk about the governing party narrative, for them the others is the opposition party narratives, and vice versa. So there was a question asked, shall we create an alternative nation of the alternative notion of the nation? It was also pointed out that there is a difference between nation and the notion of the nation. And there were a lot of discussions about the word illiberal, which is used in different contexts. Actually, there is a question within Hungary what illiberal means. And then it was rightly pointed out that if there is only one person who defines a word, and the others just listen and do not necessarily agree to that definition, then are we really talking about communication between the parties? This is probably one of the basic things that we need to have a participatory discussion on. There was also a question, an interesting question made, if they say, other than the common language and the common signals, a nation, what makes a nation work per se these days? So Heritage Contact Zone works with difficult heritage, and the Hungarian history is definitely difficult and definitely needs a space for more dialogue. We need more inclusive dialogues and not accept that the mainstream narrative oppresses and suppresses the views of parallel narratives, such as that of the others thinking in another way. We believe that this workshop definitely was fitting into the Heritage Contact Zone way of thinking, and definitely could use some of the toolkit that was mentioned earlier. And we definitely need more discussion on this. So again, as Lars was pointing it out, talking is also very important, also without solving the problem per se. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Cornelia. Still, apologies that you are not in the film. Your logo is in the film, but we did this film. We made this film in Timișoara when we met there with the different partners. Thanks a lot also for the presentation. And the main question is, this is if structures of states like Hungary permit enough public discussion about open public discussion about these issues. So, but this is not it's not me to answer this question, but experts on it and how we create these structures. So let me give the floor to Jasper for the observer of the third workshop, the golden flat one. Please, Jasper, you are also partner. I don't have to introduce you. I think everybody knows you, but you are representing our Italian partner, so to say. So the university and the scientific research, which was very important also by creating this toolkit. Thanks for this, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Joachim. So yes, I had the good fortune to be observing Alexandru Poteca's workshop on the Golden Flat this evening. And what I want to talk about is a consistent theme that we've had actually throughout our project, which is that creative interventions enable people to talk about the difficult past, to deal with it in particular ways. And it was really interesting to see how Alexandru's workshop, his carnival of communist objects, shows how this works in practice. And I want to think a little bit more about how we understand how it works, how it actually works. For me personally, I think this is a question of enchantment. So I was enchanted by the workshop, the process, the objects. And why is this important? Well, it comes down to some work by a now dead British anthropologist, Alfred Gell, on art as a kind of enchantment. It's an article he wrote in the 90s called The Technology of Enchantment. This is because art itself enchants us. You know, we know that artists are not magicians, but there's something about their artistic practice that enchants people. In the case of old masters, of course, it's turning pigments into a beautiful painting. With conceptual art, our enchantment, I think, is with the cerebral skill that shifts our understanding of the world around us. And so watching today as Alexandru took the participants through transforming everyday objects with gold leaf that was initially flaky, and then it sort of solidified onto the objects as different layers were put onto them, we saw objects transformed, but I think ideas too. And why is that powerful? Why is it powerful to work with objects and to transform them? Why might it be more powerful than a simple history lesson, for example? So the questions I have running around in my head through observing this today is it perhaps the personal and up-close aesthetic engagement with the object? You take an object, you know, you look at it very closely, you see how it was made, how it was manufactured, and you transform it. And we saw that today with the objects that were being transformed. For example, Mugur's typewriter, his beloved typewriter that enabled him to become a poet, but which he was transforming now into, you know, to give it new meaning. So my question is it the personal close-up aesthetic engagement in these processes of working through with objects? Is it the aesthetic transformation that's important, or is it the fact of doing this together? You know, the kind of social aspects of working together that make this a transformative experience. And here, Alexandru was very detailed in describing the technique. For example, the historic use of shellac, which of course has roots in Byzantium, in the Arab world, then reused in the Renaissance, and how for him it was very important not to create a mass-produced looking object, but an imperfect one. And I think here, and you'll excuse me, Alexandru, if I borrow from your brain, but here you're working on a metaphor of a certain idea of history as imperfect, or if you like, the different narratives and understandings of history as imperfect. And is it that for you, and it's sort of a question I will have for you that it would be nice if you could answer for us, that the best artistic result or aesthetic result comes from those imperfections of layers? Now that works for us, I think, because in the heritage context zone, we have an idea that there's not a monological, simple narrative telling of the past, but there are multiple pasts, and we want to engage in that multiple telling. So just as we learned in Bucharest this evening that you need a layer of glue, you have to let it dry, you have a layer of gold leaf, then you have a layer of acrylic paint, and then a layer of shellac, and then ideally none of those are directly overlapping. I mean, there are spaces between them. And we can see how each layer is attached to the others. And from what I'm hearing of the other workshops too, the way you've been conversing and talking about the past, you're seeing how they are fixed to one another, how, you know, those areas of overlap, but they don't align perfectly. And this leads me to, I should mention also that another interesting question put to Alexandru came from Dalia, which was about which are the most difficult objects to cover in gold leaf. Now that might seem a purely technical question, but I think there's a deeper metaphor too. Alexandru mentioned that it was the bed and the sofa are difficult to cover in gold leaf. You have to plaster them, if you like, they're porous fabrics in glue before you can fix anything to it. And that act of preparation to transform the object, I think, is significant. It reminds us how much preparatory work has to go into working together to establish new narratives, you know, new ways of thinking of the past. And I have one final kind of, it's an observation, it's also a question, which is on the nature of nostalgia. What came out of our workshop today, I think, is the ambivalence of that nostalgia. You know, how for some people these objects are difficult, and for other people there's a nostalgic feeling. And I want to bring up this question again of the risks of playing with nostalgia, because it's nostalgia often that is the thing that forms a strong identification with a particular narration of the past. So I will stop there, and thank you very much for the chance to participate in this fascinating workshop.
Thanks a lot, Jasper. I also participated here, and I was as impressed as you are. And partly I read the same question as you mentioned, and maybe the hour we wanted to meet is over. But I think we just take another 10 or 15 minutes of questions. Please be aware of the fact that there will be other meetings. You will have other opportunities to ask some question. If you have a question, please write just your name in the chat, and I will try to take it during the last 15 minutes. But please be brief for your questions, so we can take 4 or 5 during the time we still have. Yes, maybe Alexandru, you want to react directly
Just,
on the different,
shortly,
different questions of Jasper?
Yeah, it's like, you know, very interesting view of like Jasper about this working with layers and metaphors. And yeah, I can say that I'm interested in playing and discovering like different layers of significance of the objects, like including the memory of the objects, and questioning maybe how many persons, you know, that attached to that kind of object, how many stories are there. For some people that are like story like nostalgic, yeah. For them that are just, they want to throw away that kind of objects. Yeah, so I was fascinating about this specificity of individual reaction. I mean, in the exhibition, how they will react, the people. There are so many reactions. So yes, I was, for me, it was a challenge in the exhibition to observe this kind of things. And also what about this kind of heritage, which is like very difficult to put it in one place or other place. I think art is like that, is not giving answering, is questioning, and through this kind of process and metaphors and concepts that can reveal different way of thinking about objects and about history. It's not just in the way the archiving system in like the mainstream, like classical system of archiving, that just keep the earthly objects, which like represent something which is like relating to the certain historical time or like historical symbol, and trying to understand this kind of archiving system in a bit in a different way. I mean, to keep the used objects, thrown objects, which like they're thrown outside of the history in the, yeah. So like this is my artistic interpretation.
But I think
yes. I'm not an anthropologist, I'm not a historian, so yeah.
But I think yes, you're right. This is one important question also, how we avoid a nostalgic use of this object. For instance, if you go to Berlin and you're visiting the museum of the former GDR, which is one of the most visited museums now in Berlin, you will see this pure nostalgic use of this object, and this can't be our objective. We have to transform it, and that's why we talk about transforming these objects to create attention and yes, and the creative process.
Yes,
about,
process.
about
Like if I
it,
can
yes.
say one more.
Joachim, can I react?
Yes, yes, go ahead.
No, I was really surprised to learn in the workshop in which I observed because it was about magic objects. And as you know, Joachim, or those people who have been at Herengracht 401 in Amsterdam, our house is full of objects. And it's far from being a museum or in a responsibly climatized or whatever environment. It's a quite living environment. And for us, that we have also known the founder of the place, the objects were always alive in the stories and in everyday life. Now in the conversation with Esther, with the museum people from the Netherlands, I learned that there is a thinking of how museums can take responsibility for magic objects, which have to be passed through generations in families because they are magic and because they kind of caress your soul or contribute to healing, or tell a story, and you have to pass it on. You have to pass on the responsibility. And museums are thinking now of how to take on these objects, pass it on from one museum director to the next, and in that way keep the life of the object in a way, keep it alive, not in the sense of just storing it, cataloging it, showing it every once in a while, and being responsible in a scientific way, but also on a very human and almost spiritual level. The museums take a new responsibility there. And this is something where I think also maybe objects of the everyday life of the very recent history, we can see them differently because they partly still live with us, and we are in the process of transforming them into another life because we want to pass on stories. And I found that really interesting in the post-colonial discourse that I've attended.
Yes, you're exactly right, I think, Lars. And this use, as we said, healing use, is also maybe, and this would be maybe a question for Esther too, is also healing maybe the community as a minority. There's a chance to have another healing process, if you understand what I mean. Or I just give an example. We have a project together with the Roma community here, and they also try to highlight, so to say, a little bit magic aspects of their culture, which were discriminated during centuries. So it's a kind of inner and out society, if you see what I mean. Maybe you want to react, Esther. Please unmute the mic.
Excuse me. Yeah, I definitely think that's an important point to reach out to a community. And I think Simone, who is the author of the book Pusaka, is one of, maybe she can talk a bit more about this community and the connection that has been made and why it's so important for the persons. I'm not sure if Simone, are you there? You have to unmute yourself as well. Je moet de microfoon even uitzetten. Je microfoon staat nog uit.
So this
unmute. It doesn't work.
She's searching for it. Maybe you continue.
Yeah. Hi, meneer.
Yeah. Okay. Fine.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Hi. Hello, everybody. Yes, I'm the author of a book. I wrote stories about family history from people who were born in the former Dutch East Indies or Indonesia. And I asked them just one question. What is your Pusaka? That's an object which came by boat to the Netherlands, because after the Second World War, a lot of people were forced to leave their country. And a lot of people, they lost a lot of belongings during the Second World War, the Japanese occupation. And they came with just 1 or 2 suitcases. So imagine the things they put in it were really important for them. And they are part of the family history. So 33 persons, I asked them about this object. And those objects, you could feel their history, and sometimes the stories were very emotional, and you could feel the things that the long journey of this object, and it makes it much easier to speak about very hard times, because during the Japanese occupation a lot of things happened, and by this object, it is much more easier to tell about history life, family life, and to give through their stories.
Thanks a lot for this comment. I like to, for this first exchange we have in the frame of our program, I'd like also to inform you about the upcoming events. We meet again Wednesday with a keynote lecture by Andrea Peto about shame and memory politics of illiberal states. And we will have a Q&A afterwards. So Thursday on 26th, we will more properly, more precisely talk about the toolkit we mentioned already several times now during our discussion here. And the project, the toolkit in policy, open up, and how to work again with contested heritage. We will have some participants of our project, Marie Heller, Anja Zückmantel, Cristina Modriano, who will tell us about their experience. And we will have, last but not least, afterwards, the rooted participation heritage contact zone in support of new heritage policies with some representative of Europe, member of the European Parliament, and the deputy head of the unit Creative Europe, and with Arminia Shakatano, the officer and minister cabinet in the Ministry of Cultural Heritage of Italy. So we will have a rich program, different aspects, and please apologize, I excuse if we just close this tonight. We open many questions. Thanks a lot to the facilitators. Thanks a lot to the observers. This was fascinating. Thanks a lot to all the participants. See you again, I hope, in 2 days.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.